So let's start right at the beginning. This overall RMR system, right? I want to get your thoughts on it, because I will say, just as a little bit of history for people, the old systems to come to the major also had their flaws. Like, it was mad in the early days that we literally just used like an online qualifier, which luckily, amazingly, all the good teams just got through back then because there wasn't that many teams. Then we just took that legend system of like, if you're top 8, you get to the next major, no matter what. Doesn't matter how bad you are, you can be terrible, but you get there. That was okay because obviously it means the winner gets it. You know, there's upsides and downsides, but it meant that, like, for example, you know, sometimes you cut 2 players, and by the way, if one of them's like one of the best players in the world, you're going to be shit next major, as has happened. Then we went to the system with the legend spots, but also the minor, so at least the main qualifier, if you didn't come top 8, was a LAN. By the way, still some very famous things. Fnatic, most notably, failed those. NIP failed to even get to some of those. So we've definitely not had, it's not like I'm saying there was a perfect system before, there definitely wasn't. But this new approach, and unfortunately obviously kicked in during the online period, was the RMRs, which is basically a whole bunch of qualifiers spread out, and it's a point system, and at the end, top X gets out. I think in Europe it's like 8 or 9, in CIS it's like 5 or 6, NA I'm going to guess it's like fucking probably like 3 or 4, and then I don't even fucking know for Oceanic region. Look, everyone's tuned out of that. Let's just be real. So what do you think of this RMR system overall here, Tommy? Because I will say, obviously they couldn't necessarily go into the foresight that it would last this long online and we wouldn't have a major. It was supposed to be the ESL Rio major, obviously at the end of last year.
So, I mean, I think I've been on the record for like quite a while that I just think the RMR system is not good. I mean, like, so I just looked up some of my old tweets on this. So earlier this year, during the first RMR of this year, which was in May, I said that getting 7th through 8th in 2 RMR events gets you more points than winning one. Like,
that's crazy. That's actually mental.
So first of all, like, the point system is broken. That's just like one fundamental issue. And like, by the way,
dude, that even reminds me, you'll appreciate this. Do you remember at the end of 2019, one of the last events fucking sucked because it was the Blast Global Finals? And here's what happened. They had Astralis and Team Liquid there. Awesome. But do you remember the other 2 teams they had? They had FaZe, because FaZe won one. But number 4, because this is exactly relevant to what you're saying, NIP didn't even get to a single Blast final because they just went to 3 Blasts. They qualified instead of, you're going to like this, ENCE, who fucking won a Blast. Literally won one. And they didn't get a qualifier. So instead, NIP went there with FaZe Clan, just took their beatings, and it was always going to be Astralis versus Team Liquid. So they ruined their own global final. So I agree. That is mental if that's true. Like 2 times. Did he say it's only 2 times you have to come 7th to 8th?
Yeah, that's more points than winning one.
Wow. Because there's another problem with this approach, by the way. Like always, you need a real expert to figure out how to distribute the points. And they distribute the points in a way where it's like, dude, the jumps are mental. Like, sometimes, isn't it like 100, 150 points between spots? But as you say, it means if I win, I don't necessarily get a mega box or whatever.
And the real issue really is the way that it's set up. I'll talk about the format in a broader sense then, is really that given the fact that there's so many spots, like you said, it's like 8 or 9 spots for Europe, like 5 or 6 spots for the CIS, etc., that for both of these regions, what eventually happens is that for the final RMR, what's going to decide who makes it in is who makes the playoffs, right? So like you either make the playoffs, in which case you're very likely to get in Europe, or you don't, in which case you're almost certainly out unless you've gotten a bunch of points earlier and you just get lucky with like how the other teams place, etc. The problem with that is that for this format in particular, there's 2 teams going to playoffs per group, right? So like what really matters is there's some team is going to win the group, which is assumed for simplicity. 6 teams per group. Some team goes 5-0. If there's 2 sort of next level teams who are competing for the 2nd spot, one of them's probably going to go 4-1 and the following one 3-2, assuming no upsets. That really means that we're doing this like massive round robin group stage, and it's all going to come down to 1 best of 1. Like if you're actually solving for top 8 placings rather than the winners of the tournament, which this is not, like you can say it is, but it's not. Like nobody's going to care about the final.
No, it doesn't matter.
Like people just are not going to care about it. I'm sorry to ruin that for anybody watching, but like you have to set up the format such that it's actually solving for those spots. So for example, maybe what it is you do a Swiss system where the teams that get 3-0 like are immediately in.
Yes.
And then the teams that get like 3-1 are immediately in. And then you do some other like more complicated mini tournament among the other teams that are like reasonably close at that point. Like you have to solve the system so that it's actually looking like makes those games interesting. Like for example, like, I have a vested interest in what happens in the ENCE group. almost certainly their tournament was decided in that overtime loss against OG, because they're most likely going to lose against Vitality if you look at the odds, and they're going to beat Sprout in the final game. In which case, like, that game already decided everything. Like, there's obviously some chance that like something else happens, someone gets upset, etc. But like that decided it, and like that was day 2. You know, like, it's just like a bad system. And then going back on the broader point, like 2 things. One, like the results from 6 months ago are just like not relevant. That was the whole reason why people wanted to move away from the Legends format.
Absolutely.
People didn't want to lock in teams based on like what they did. Like sometimes you make playoffs winning 2 or 3 games at a major 6 months ago. You get into the next one. Sometimes 8 months ago. And like, that's just bullshit. Should not happen. People wanted to move away from that. But then the replacement we got is RMRs, where it's 6 months of tournaments. And like, fine, there's one closer to the end, which has more weighting. At the same time, like that also matters. And like there eventually, if you run this long enough, there's going to be a situation where like a new super team is formed. Say like, think like the FaZe team of 2017, like right before the major circuit. And they're not going to be able to qualify because they didn't play the earlier tournaments, right? Like, and then the other piece is this has massive impact on the rest of the ecosystem. Like, we're watching all these matches, and they're playing, like we said, they're really playing to win, like, the 2 games that matter, and it's a bunch of best of ones, and then we're going to waste time on the playoffs that don't matter at all, and there's going to be a couple of teams for whom those points really matter, and then there's going to be a bunch of teams who couldn't care less. Like, that's just not a good format. It's not good entertainment, and, like, during this time, by the way, we could instead have like a big blast tournament. We could have like a big IEM tournament. Like there could be something very interesting on the calendar that would be much more interesting for everybody to watch. Like if this were a legitimate tournament, call it like, you know, the second tournament back on LAN in like the last 18 months after Cologne, call it 250K, 300K, all the best teams are here. That's 10 times more interesting than an RMR. It just is. So like, I think the broader system with like 3 RMRs is bad. I think you should just have single qualifier before the major. Call it a day. Like maybe there's like some pre-qualifiers, invitations. Some teams don't have to go through the online system, whatever. Just have one qualifier, call it a day. First of all, change the format of that qualifier so that it actually optimizes for the middle placings and not just who wins, because who wins doesn't really matter. That's not how the seeding is going to work. You're not using the first seed for anything at the major. It's just not really going to matter. And then 3, like, think about the rest of the ecosystem too, because there's a lot of other things going on. And I think for the most part, people would rather watch other big tournaments where the best teams can play and where something is at stake rather than a bunch of these matches that are currently ongoing.
Want to see more cool, funny, interesting clips based on topics from my content? Well, subscribe to this channel then, or, be a pleb and don't.